Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another one of these things that I record while my son is sleeping. Today, we're talking about stuff. I finished a new Radio Skyline, and I thought it was a pretty good episode. I had some solid inspiration in there and a couple of good jokes. Somebody asked for Peyton Patrol, and I gave it to them. They wished on a monkey's paw, and wish granted. Now, Peyton will run things around here, or will at the very least cause as much harm as possible as she can with the limited amount of authority that she's given, because that is what Peyton would do. So, I'm looking forward to some more Peyton episodes. I think it'll be fun. But I had someone leave the Patreon over it, complaining that I had grown too political, and that is a shame. I personally disagree with that. I feel that, I don't know, what can I say? The whole political environment has gotten so weird and sketchy, especially as we ramp up to the November elections and everything like that. And I'm just going to flat out say it, with Trump in the Oval Office, like, people's priorities have gotten really screwed up. And especially on the right wing. Again, just like being honest, just throwing it out there. Because the Republican Party that I grew up with kind of focused a lot more on this, the deficit hawk type of stuff, and they tried to be about family values, which was kind of code for the abortion and homosexuality stuff and everything like that. And those were all, like, I don't know, social things. I don't know why the right wing ever got so bent out of shape about homosexuality. I get the abortion stuff. Like, that's such a tricky issue, even when people, it's that one's a difficult one. So I kind of get why that would become very controversial. There's a lot of things you could say about it. And so, like, there were the social issues that the Republicans championed, but it was all kind of like you could kind of see where it was coming from, and it was easy to understand. But as we've gotten into the Trump presidency, it's become a lot more about demagoguery and figuring out who to blame for problems as they escalate. Well, you've got a guy in office who's fundamentally just escalating everything. It's like, well, why does it feel like things are getting worse? And it's like, well, because the guy who's supposed to be working on all this is kind of like he doesn't really know what he's doing. And anyway, I mean, there's a lot that I could say, and I'm frankly just kind of tired of being really sympathetic towards the views of the right wing, because the right wing hasn't really expressed very much sympathy towards anyone else lately, and crazier and crazier views are becoming the norm. There was an article recently about Jim Gaffigan, who came out against Trump, and the way he put it is, he's like, I feel like we've allowed my crazy uncle to take over the political dynamic in this country. Like, we just have to sit there and listen to him rant about all these crazy things he believes, and you can't tell him he's wrong, because then he gets upset and he storms off, and he'll stop patronizing your products and whatever. You can't sell things to me anymore because I believe in all this this hate speech. And then you get the people like on the last the last Greg in your ear, someone came in with the comments and they're like, well, it's intellectually dishonest to ban someone for promoting hate speech, and frankly, I disagree with that. For a long time now, for many years, I have felt that one of the most frustrating things about Moot and the way that he handled 4chan, for example, and really all the social media platforms are guilty of this, was that they would refuse to moderate hate speech on the basis that, like, once we start doing that, where do we draw the line? Like, how do we know what hate speech is? How do we know what that looks like? And to a certain extent, that's true. When you create mechanisms to try to crack down on a particular point of view, you have to be cautious with that, because any tool that can be used to crack down on your political enemies can potentially turn around and be used against you. However, in the case of hate speech, I think that fairly enforced, you actually don't get the problem of, like, well, it'll be used against us later. Because around 2015 is when we started seeing a lot of hate speech coming out of the left wing. And again, just being honest here, that's the way that I saw it. We had a lot of people talking about the male gender and white skin color, and what that meant, which is really quite ludicrous in my opinion. You can't really judge people based on their skin color or their just their demographic. Everyone's an individual, and it's quite silly to try to say, like, well, the majority of individuals, like, people have to be treated like the statistics that I have here. And this is a very popular thing. Cranks and grifters love statistics because they're very easy to manipulate to make them seem to support a conclusion that really isn't true. And so today I thought that I would talk a little bit about this. I've gone over this before, but it always bears repeating. Let's talk about the science, because one of the things that we see a lot in politics today is fake science, or rather people who use scientific sounding things to support really, really bunk arguments. So in the actual scientific method, you have a couple of different ways of gathering data, but only some of them are really useful in a hard sense. If you're in an ideal condition, the best thing that you can do is have like actual empirical data. And that is where you have like a test. The researchers are totally blind to what they're trying to find. Like you just be like let's suppose you wanted to test the efficiency of like vinegar for treating mold, you know. So what you would do is you would get some mold, and you would cultivate that mold on like, I don't know, a plywood plank or something like that, and then you would apply the vinegar to the plywood plank, and then you would measure like, did the mold spores rebound, and this and that. And with enough mold and enough checking, you could actually see, generally speaking, how much mold was actually reduced, and then so you could kind of give a figure and maybe put some values to it. And like, life is very fuzzy. There's not really, very few things are completely exact. Like theoretical math is fairly exact, but that's about as pure as it ever gets. So even if you're going to test something like mold, you still have some kind of, there's a little bit of variance. You could say like, well, how porous that particular plywood really is. Like, you could get like different brands of plywood, and so you can tell people like, yeah, this particular, vinegar has this effect on plywood, but then maybe they get a different brand that's more porous, it doesn't work, and so the data doesn't hold up out in the field, and this is a common problem. So empirical data is the most reliable thing we have in spite of that. But then what you do is you get down into like lesser tiers of data, and so below that you have like corollary data. And corollary data is the type of thing where you do some research and you gather some data, you ask some questions, and you find like, well, statistically speaking, it looks kind of like these numbers sort of line up. And with this sort of thing, this can be useful in epidemiology if you already know the cause of a problem. So if you know that if a certain population starts developing a lot of Campylobacter poisoning, that's a stomach bug, and so people are getting a lot of food poisoning, you can say like, okay, so we've identified Campylobacter, and we know places that Campylobacter can be found. So we say like maybe a local well or something like that is to blame, or it's a restaurant. These days it's usually like a restaurant. So you go back and you check you talk to the people, and you say like, well, where have you eaten in these past couple of weeks? And they'll say like, well, I ate at so-and-so, I ate at Joe's. And if enough people report that they ate at Joe's, then you would go and you would check Joe's out, knowing that you're looking for Campylobacter specifically, and then you check Joe's food, and you'd see if you can find like, are they not cooking certain things? Like, you can even ask the people what they were eating, so you could get more specific. But the fact is, you started off knowing what the problem was, which meant that with the corollary data, you were able to backtrack and find the source of the problem. So epidemiology is great when you already know why things are. But when you're trying to figure out something like, if people are getting like some kind of stomach bug, and you didn't know anything about Campylobacter, like let's suppose you really didn't know anything about microbes at all, and you were trying to figure out what was giving people food poisoning, you would just be completely whistling in the dark, right? You'd be like, so, what have you done lately? Like, do you own a TV? And so if the person who's doing this research, if they really didn't like TV, they might ask people if they had a television, and so they'd find that like, oh, well, yeah, like all the respondents own televisions. Everyone who got sick, they owned a television. And so they publish a report that says like the cause of food poisoning is television, because there's this correlation, right? See, because you really don't know the cause of the problem. Like, if you don't know the cause of the problem, then the statistical data it's not very useful. It doesn't tell you that much. So it's pretty weak data. It can be used to form a hypothesis. So you can say like, well, I see that everyone had a TV, so I hypothesize that television was the cause of this food poisoning. But then you would have to go to like a lab and do an empirical study where you expose lab rats to TV and see if they develop food poisoning. And then when they don't develop food poisoning, you have to accept that, okay, television doesn't cause food poisoning. Now, the problem with the social sciences is that a lot of times you get into stuff like people, you say like, well, people are behaving in this way because of their poverty or this or that, and these things are happening, and there's a lot of what they have, what they call confounds, and a confound is something like in an ideal research condition, you would have one variable that you're testing. You're specifically looking to see if TV causes food poisoning. But in an actual field study, you find that people are like going out to restaurants, they're watching TV, they're doing all kinds of different things, and you really can't possibly account for all the differences in behavior. So, you may see some data connections, but because you can't account for all the different things people are doing, you won't know for sure what they have in common. You may have some good guesses, but without doing a proper lab study, you're never really going to isolate the issue. So, if you look at something like the odds of, if you're trying to figure out like what causes people to become a serial killer, for example, you can look at some statistical data and form some kind of hypothesis. But how are you going to do an empirical lab study that turns people into serial killers? You really can't hardly do that. You could try to do that with like maybe lab mice somehow, but then like mice have such different behaviors from humans that I really don't like it. You wouldn't really have a very good connection. So people really like statistics because you can make a lot of really foolish and bunk assumptions, and then you can prop it up and act as though it's scientific when really it's not very scientific. So this is something that's really important when it comes to like people talking about stuff. You see people, the racist guys really like to talk statistics. Like they love that. They're like, oh yeah, we've got FBI statistics that show that this race is being arrested more often, therefore they are more prone to criminal behavior. That's the type of thing that they say. And really that statistics, all those statistics they have are garbage. Like the data that they're using, it really doesn't tell them anything because there's no way for you to isolate specific causes. You just make an assumption and then be like, well, the data supports it, but there is no data. The data doesn't support it. It's just numbers. It's just statistics. It doesn't mean anything unless you have an exact cause and you can work backwards knowing the cause in the first place. And so that's kind of the thing is when people use statistics to like support something kind of dubious, they're assuming a conclusion to start with and then trying to work backwards. But if their premise is wrong, if their assumption is wrong, then what they're saying is stupid and useless. And you shouldn't have to take it seriously. And I feel like very many people don't really understand that this is how statistics actually work. They don't really understand how it is science and how it all applies. And so they can be fooled really easily by just kind of couching things in a scientific sounding discussion when the reality is that it's just as dumb as if your crazy uncle suggested it. And then finally below that we have anecdotes, which basically all of Freudian science was based on just anecdotes. You just get up there and you say like, well, I met this guy named Frank, and I made him sleep with and I made him wear earmuffs to bed, and it cured his depression. That worked for Frank. Ergo, I should not treat. I recommend that all patients be treated by making them wear earmuffs. And this is even worse than corollary data. Like it's not much worse. And I want to say that because I really want to drive home how pointless statistics are in determining things. But anecdotes are like you barely have anything supporting an anecdote. You don't have much supporting statistics either, but you have very little supporting an anecdote. So anecdotes are totally worthless, and that's the kind of thing where you have people, like I said, that previous guy who's like, well, the fairest thing you can do is let me post videos that support my point of view. And that's like saying, well, the fairest thing you can do is let me post anecdotes that incriminate this group that I dislike. And it's like, no, it's really not the fairest thing I could do. I know better than that. I'm not going to fall for that kind of rhetoric. You can't convince me that you're being fair when I know categorically you're being very unfair. That's not how any of this works. So, yes, that's the science and everything like that. These anecdotes and whatnot. It's all kind of being used and then treated like I say, you get this kind of racism, and it's basically as good as Freudian psychology. And it does go both ways. Like around 2015 was when this thing was at its height. They were talking about like how men needed to be re-educated because men are all naturally prone. The men are statistically speaking more likely to be criminals and everything else like that. It's kind of like if the male gender were naturally prone to criminal behavior, you would see like a really like I don't know how to put this in a way that won't immediately get someone being like, no, but look, the data. But let me put it this way. Like, okay, so suppose you're trying to prove that TV causes a stomach illness, and then you find someone who owns a TV and they don't get a stomach illness. It doesn't necessarily show that people don't get stomach illnesses from TV, but it does imply that it's, you know, it's not like a 100% shot, you know. And then you kind of look at like, well, how many people own TVs and don't get sick from like, then they don't get sick. And it's like, well, quite a lot of people own TVs and don't develop food poisoning. And if you really still want to believe that TV causes food poisoning, you can still play with the data and make it look like that. But you know, I don't know, what can I say? If you have like millions of men who are not criminals, then at that point it starts to be where it's like, well, being male is not a meaningful thing to connect to crime, just as being a particular skin color is not a meaningful thing to connect to crime. Like, you know, I don't know. Like, you could throw those numbers out there, but do they really mean anything? At the end of the day, is what it all comes down to. Does this have any meaning at all? Is this important, or are you just a racist or somehow bigoted crank? Because I mean, most people don't really. I mean, because. Like, even if we agree with the premise that, like, oh yes, a gender or a skin color can make you crazy, like, well, what would you do with that information then? Like, what do you you know, I don't know. It's just one of those things. Like, there's no real pragmatic pathway in that line of discussion. I mean, it's ludicrous to start with, and then even if you go in for it, it's like, well, a lot of times the end goal is that they're just like, well, what we need are a bunch of like really repressive laws that crack down on this scapegoat that I've identified, and that's what it really comes down to. So yeah, I don't believe in any of that. I don't believe that the people who want to talk this stuff on my Discord server or on 4chan or anywhere else really do deserve the time of day. I don't think that those people are like, they can talk about intellectual honesty all they want, but get back to me when there's actually intellectual honesty here in play. So, yes. Anyway, though, so all that said, there's like, I've got a lot of opinions on kind of probably where problems lie and what might need to be done for everyone's benefit. Like, one of these things that I don't know, like, there's a lot that could be discussed, but just the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, when you're talking about people, you kind of have to talk about them knowing that everyone's going to be an individual. And you can't single people out for being a specific race or whatever. And even politically, you can't necessarily single people out, because, like, I know Trump supporters who would otherwise be, like, fine people. I don't know why they're excited for Donald Trump. Like, I don't understand it. It's very alien to me to see people be like, yeah, I'm really looking forward to another, 4 years of Donald Trump. But some of them are just earnestly like that, and I suspect it has a lot to do with the branding. Like, I think that maybe they don't really care what Donald Trump has done. It's more that they just really like the Republican brand, and because this has kind of gotten to be sort of a brand war, like, it's like Democrats versus Republicans, it's like Coca-Cola versus Pepsi, it's like they've convinced you that it really, really matters what your opinion of the brand is. That more people are defending the brand, and they really don't understand the politics, and they don't, like, you get into this kind of like the data and the science and the whatever, and they don't really understand any of it or how to evaluate it, and so they're just like, I like the Republican brand, and Donald Trump is currently the leader of my brand, and so therefore I'm really excited about Donald Trump. Look at how angry he's making all these dang, I love Coca-Cola, look at how angry Coca-Cola is making Pepsi. They must be doing something right, or else, people drinking Pepsi wouldn't be this angry. That's my best guess. I mean, that's my good faith guess. That's my benefit of the doubt guess, is that the people who are excited about Trump are just happy about the brand, and that's all they really want. They just want to see more of their brand success. But as far as, like, reading about what the Trump administration does and has been up to, it's like terrifying. It's one of those things where, like, I have never before in my life thought to myself, like, I could have been president. Like, sometimes you see things and you're just like, man, like, I could do a better job. Like, I could take over and I would do a much better job with this than what I am seeing be done. And the Trump presidency is one of those things, like, I think that you could pick me up today, drop me in office, and just let me have a run at it, and I could totally run the country better than this. This has just been madness. This is so stupid. And everything that he has done, he says a lot of stupid things. He upsets a lot of people. He's divisive. He's not bringing anyone together. He hasn't really gotten anything done. He's like talking, he's like, oh, me and Kim Jong-un, we're like great friends. I wrote him a love letter, and like Kim Jong-un doesn't respect him. Freaking, I mean, like, that you are a poor diplomat when you put your neck out for Kim Jong-un, and then he turns around and he's like, yeah, that guy's an idiot. Like, geez. Any of his long-standing advisors or diplomats could have told him it was going to go that way. Like, I had a whole book. I had this book. It's like the size of a dictionary. I don't know. It was a huge book. It was like a 500-page book about our diplomatic relations with North Korea and, like, the history of the country and where we got, like, what have we tried, what have we done. And, like, as I was watching Donald Trump unfold his plan, it was almost comical to me, because it was just like, after reading all these things that they've tried to do with North Korea and all these interactions and everything, it was just like, man, he must not know any of this. Like people probably tried to tell him, and he probably told them to shut up. He's like, I'll do it. I'm a big kid. I'm in charge. I'll get to be president. You guys you're just dumb. Like, he built a nuclear bomb, and I'm gonna go meet him personally, and I'm gonna validate his entire nuclear program. Just watch me. You're all gonna feel dumb when I'm the king. And I don't know. I don't understand why anyone would be excited for more of this. The other thing, like, there are people who just, like, hate the left wing with a passion, and I understand that, at least. Like, I get that. I get hating the other side to the extent that you will do everything to harm them. I don't understand being thrilled about your team. Like, why are you pleased with your own politicians? What have they ever done that could possibly make you happy? I don't get you people. Why are you not cynical? Why? Yeah, but anyway, though, I don't know. It's madness. I mean, like, I can't really speak for what I think that Joe Biden will do. But really, I don't know what anyone sees as excitement for Trump. So, yes. Yeah, call me political, but whatever. The election's coming up, and really, guys, it's been a little too much. I do feel like, you don't have to love Biden, but if you want things done, I mean, goodness, like, it's okay if you want a Republican leader. Like, if you align with those points of view, like, maybe you really like the brand, you really love Coke more than you love Pepsi. And some people will tell you that both products taste about the same, it's all sugar water. And in some regards that's true, but that's fine. But you don't have to settle for, like, the most unhealthy brand of Coke just to spite people who love Pepsi, okay? You can have like just regular Coke. It'd be fine. I won't judge you for just drinking like regular classic Coke. You don't have to drink like Coke with arsenic in it. You don't have to poison yourself just to spite Pepsi. And yeah, that's where I am politically. That's how I felt, and I don't know. I've tried to avoid talking about it too much or getting too political, because it's really not. No, the channel is about. But as far as, like, the satire goes with Radio Skyline, it's not that what can I say? It's a fairly reasonable place to do satire of like the right wing media, because right wing media has gotten to be, or just like some of this crazy stuff, these weird crank things. It is great for Peyton to get into, as far as like jokes go, because Peyton herself is crazy, and so like these crazy things that Peyton believes can make for some wonderful bits. And I think I can mostly keep them local to Macaque so that it doesn't get too much about like the international stuff. But last time, on the last episode, it was just sort of like, like this guy caused the housing crisis, and I had to actually like look up like who really did come up with the derivatives, and so I learned something new as a result of that. I went and I looked it up, and I was like, who actually did all this? What did this guy do? And at the end of his like I checked out a couple of the articles that they wrote about him, and I looked at his Wikipedia page, and at the end of his Wikipedia page was where they had that little bit about his vegan cookbook, which just cracked me up. It was like, caused the housing crash, or is kind of treated as having caused the housing crash. It really wasn't him by himself, but he was an important player in the whole thing. And there's like all that, and then it's like also vegan cookbook, and it's like, okay, weird. But I don't know. Trump pardoned him. Was the other thing. Like, I heard vaguely about that, and it didn't really, like, register for me as being like, oh, yeah, okay, for, like, a fraudster, whatever, he got pardoned. That's what the news did, is they were like, yeah, this guy was indicted for, like, fraud, he's, like, a white-collar billionaire, criminal type of guy, and then I was like, yeah, okay, all right, white-collar criminal, whatever. And then when I was doing research for the Radio Skyline, I was like, oh, wait, that's the guy that got pardoned? The toxic derivatives guy? What? Man, we forgave the banks, and then, like, even the guy that got arrested at the end of all that, he got pardoned? Like, they just let him skate? Man! I just gotta say, those people out there, like, looting and whatever, you guys got it all messed up. You gotta steal from Wall Street. You gotta defraud the banks. That's where all the forgiveness is at. Man. Yeah, I don't know. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what people necessarily want out of politics anymore. It feels like at this point, they're just trying to save the country from each other. And, like, as far as, like, if Trump gets voted into office again, I don't believe that he really has a plan for what he's gonna do. And they've been talking about really weirdly authoritarian stuff. Like, Roger Stone got in the news recently because he was like, declare martial law and then lock up. I don't know. It's crazy. I worry sometimes. I've always thought that as if we ever wind up in a totalitarian dictatorship, I would be one of those people who gets executed. And I'm starting to worry about that a little bit. The powers that have been given to the president are a lot broader than I realized. The Trump presidency really made me realize exactly how strong the president can be these days. And that probably really needs to be dialed back for everyone's sake. And the problem is, though, is that whoever's in power, they never want to give up those powers. And so they're talking about, like, well, when the Democrats take over the Senate, they're gonna get rid of the filibuster and have less cooperation and everything else like that. And going in that direction is not really good because, like, okay, so suppose the Democrats do that, and like maybe the Republicans they're terrified that, like, well, the Democrats could seize power after they do that, and potentially they could, and if they don't, then when the Republicans are in charge, they will use the exploit to seize power. And see, this is the where the problem lies with power grabs, is that if your power grab isn't absolute, but you leave the loophole open, then when you lose your power, then someone will take advantage of that and take over things. And so you really do have to, like, you have to keep politicians in check. You have to keep power balanced. The systems that we have in place are supposed to be doing that, but they're kind of being eroded. And like I say, there's this very radical attitude, which is not very healthy. So I don't know, but we'll see how all of it turns out. If I wind up in some kind of kangaroo court at some point later on in life, and that's where it all ends for me, then in a generation or so, when that government collapses because all it did was kill dissenters, then you can say Greg was right. Don't say I was right while we're in the middle of our dictatorship, though. They'll throw you away too, for your own safety, at least. At least don't talk about it. Yeah, because I don't know. Like I said, when they came out, and a lot of people were talking about like, oh, gender critical theory and this, and like, oh, men are all the criminals and things like that. I spoke out against that too, and yeah, I'll be the first on. I'll be on the chopping block if we ever wind up in a nightmare dystopia. So that's how it is. That's what I think. You may be upset because I don't share your politics, but you know, I'm not a very brand savvy person. I don't particularly care about the brands. I feel that it's not really the how things should be evaluated for their value. So I will always be on some stage of opposition, usually to the radical elements of either party. But you know, if either radical element ever wins and takes over, then I'll be in trouble. So that's it for today. Thanks for joining me, everybody. I'll catch y'all next time.